Woodland Tales by Hipkiss Graney. Told by Synthia Oenga. Music by Anna Palmer and Beth Bellis.
Chapter 1. Woodkid and Muntjac. Woodkid was alone deep in the great woodlands. They lay upon a flat, mossy rock, staring up at the swaying canopy above. For as far back as Woodkid could remember, they had been alone. Leaves crunched beneath Woodkid's feet as they danced through the forest, under the cover of trees, over fallen branches and wildflowers, when, suddenly, they saw a creature standing beside an old dead tree. The tree had been split right down the middle, and the creature stood beside it, staring into a deep wound in the trunk. The creature was dressed in a coat of long grasses, green and gold, and was almost hidden by the deep, dark undergrowth. Woodkid slipped behind a tree before plucking up the courage to say hello. Then, full of excitement, Woodkid spoke first. "My name is Woodkid." "I am Muntjac," the creature replied, wide-eyed and somewhat apprehensive. The two sat down and told each other stories about where they were from and what they had seen on their travels. Woodkid could only ever remember being on their own, but it seemed Muntjac had met many other creatures in his life. From then on, the two became inseparable friends. They would play in the woods, leap over fallen trees, explore new places, and run through the valley. Mutchak was often much slower than Woodkid and found it difficult to keep up, but was still always great fun to go on adventures with. One night, after a particularly busy day of finding bugs, the two friends retired to Woodkid's camp at the foot of a mighty beech tree. They talked and talked well into the night before slowly drifting off to sleep in the arms of the tree. Woodkid and Muntjac awoke to whispers in the air. Then they felt a rumbling, like the unrest of a mounting storm from deep within the earth, rising up through the roots and then the trees. As they opened their eyes, they witnessed something so spectacular. Woodkid thought they must still be dreaming. Below the branches of an oak tree, two beings emerged in the darkness of the woods, surrounded by a pale blue light. They were not fashioned like Woodkid and Muntjac. They were unlike anything they had seen before. The weavers, Muntjac gasped as he peered through the leaves. Muntjac had been told stories of the weavers of the woods, but had never before set eyes upon them. The beings, figures bright and luminous, crowned with an eclipse of moths, moved across the earth like wildflowers swaying in the wind. With each step, slowly the ground beneath their feet began to glimmer. Out across the woodland floor, a tangle of shimmering streams spread, knotted and writhed across the dark earth. The trees were whispering a secret language between themselves. And slowly, the weavers, Cilia and Flagilla, goddesses of mycelium, after waking the trees from their slumber, drifted deeper into the thick woodland night, and only moonlight remained. Woodkid and Muntjac laid back against the old beech tree and returned to a deep and restful sleep. Chapter 2. Woodkid and the Watcher. When Woodkid awoke, Muntjac was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps he's gone to gather something for breakfast, they thought, yawning. But Muntjac did not return to the tree. A little upset, Woodkid gathered their things and set out further into the woods, searching for their friend. Stumbling through the forest, kicking leaves into the air, Woodkid looked up to see Muntjac sat on a half-fallen tree. Woodkid picked up the pace and shouted, "Muntjac! Muntjac!" Muntjac turned, and a smile flickered across his face. "Hello, Woodkid." Muntjac was pleased to see Woodkid and had wondered how long it would take them to find him. He remained quite close to where they had camped that night and was hoping that Woodkid would find him. Just as Woodkid began to plan the day's activities, Muntjac struck him down with a somber tone. He dismissed Woodkid's pleas. "There are more serious matters than games," he said quietly. "Like what?" shouted Woodkid, back in disbelief. He had never heard anything so absurd. "The woodland is for adventure, exploring, games." "You have a lot to learn about the woods, and I cannot play with you today." Woodkid tried and tried to get Muntjac to play, but eventually relented, heading off into the trees. "You're a miserable stuck in the mud. I'll go off on my own then," shouted Woodkid angrily. Woodkid and Muntjac had played together all summer, ever since the first day they met. Was this to change? In the woodlands, time can behave very differently. There are no seconds, minutes, hours, or days. Just the crossing of the sun and moon, and the slow changing of the seasons. Woodkid wandered until noon when they came across an open glade they had never seen before. A long, flat rock, partially buried, rose from the earth, and lying on its top was a great hound. Unlike anything Woodkid had ever seen. It had long white fur and eyes of pink with black pupils and terrible fangs. With some trepidation, Woodkid clambered up the stony hill and nervously called out, "Hello? My name is Woodkid." The beast's head turned slowly, and its enormous head gazed down into Woodkid's eyes. A wave of warm, heavy breath. "Hello, Woodkid. I am the Watcher. Where have you come from?" The woods below. I have a camp across the valley. The Watcher's eyes shone.
You are very little. Are you alone?
I was with my friend Muntjac, but he can't play at the minute, replied Woodkid as he looked away from the Watcher. The Watcher could feel Woodkid's sadness.
I know of Muntjac. You must give him some time to be alone,
said the Watcher.
And maybe you should spend some time alone too.
I don't think I want to. Woodkid hated being alone. Before Muntjac, being alone was all they knew. The Watcher was still and silent, except for the occasional exhale of breath. As they sat by the left paw of the Great Hound, Woodkid rested their chin in their hands and stared up at the moving leaves in the canopy.
Being alone is important, but it's even more important to be happy when alone,
said the Watcher. How can I be happy when I'm alone? Asked Woodkid.
The woods have a secret way of guiding us at times,
said the Watcher, as they lowered their head down onto the flat rock and slowly closed their eyes.
Sit with me. Close your eyes and listen. Listen to the sounds of the woodlands.
Woodkid sat with the Watcher, closed their eyes and listened to the leaves moving in the wind. The falling of the twigs on the earth, the creaking of wood, and all the rustling and scurrying of the creatures moving about the land. Woodkid's heart was lifted. They felt happy, content. When they opened their eyes, the sun had already set, and the Great Hound was gone. Chapter 3. Woodkid and the Crow. Spring. Woodkid had travelled for many days since meeting the Watcher. Tired and thirsty, they decided to take a rest below a large oak tree. Woodkid had stitched together a cloak out of leaves and grass. It was perfect for disappearing into the landscape, but also made a very natty blanket, which Woodkid threw over themselves before nestling into the trunk of a tree. Exhausted from their trek, it wasn't long before they fell into a vivid and haunting slumber. It was a dark, dark night in the woods, and for miles around only one light could be seen. It belonged to a small, lonely house nestled deep within the trees. There was a warm glow from lamps flickering through old glass windows. Although Woodkid did not recognize this house, it seemed so familiar. Some forgotten place, lost to memory and time. As Woodkid approached, the sounds of muffled voices could be heard from behind the door. The voices grew and grew with each step. But before Woodkid could reach the door, they felt like they were walking through treacle. Reaching for the door handle, the house seemed to be slowly moving further and further away, and Woodkid felt like they were sinking deeper and deeper into soil. Deeper and deeper in the soil, until the house and the lights and the voices were hidden by long, tall grass. Woodkid wanted to reach out, scream for help, but couldn't. And then they awoke. Only traces of the dream remained throughout the day, and soon it would be gone altogether, although Woodkid would remain shaken for long after. Grey, rolling clouds shrouded the woodland, and Woodkid felt the only way to settle their nerves was to make a pot of tea. Lightning lit the sky in bursts, and a moment later, rain began to patter upon the leaves in the canopy above. Woodkid watched the sky as another flash of lightning lit the land. Soon, the rain grew into a deluge, breaking through the branches, filling Woodkid's teacup until it overflowed. There was another flash of lightning, followed by a crash of leaves and twigs. An enormous black shape burst through the thick canopy, hurtled down to the earth. Woodkid's eyes followed its trajectory. Couldn't have landed too far from the camp. Woodkid quickly set off through the mist to the bird's aid. Out of breath and gasping, Woodkid arrived at the place where the bird had fallen. A stunning black bird lay on the forest floor. Its beautiful black, long, shiny feathers twitched as light began to fade from the animal's eyes. Woodkid stroked its feathers gently. They must have been caught in the storm, before they could get home in time, Woodkid thought. Through the mist, among the sound of pouring rain, came a slow, rhythmic beat of drums. Bright lanterns appeared across the path. Their light was pulsating. Carrying the lanterns and gliding above the earth, hidden by long painted masks, were a group of figures. Round, spiked headdresses cut through the mist like swords, and their eyes looked here and there, scanning the woodland floor. Woodkid tried to lift the crow, but it was no use. The animal was too heavy. Woodkid scampered behind the nearest tree and watched as the strange figures glided towards them. Each growled a low, terrible lament as they surrounded the fallen crow. Woodkid wanted to run, fearing they might catch them. Before they could make a decision, something appeared in the mist. The outline of a great figure, as tall as the tallest tree, stood, eyes red as the heart of a wildfire, and a crown of gnarled branches that seemed to writhe and curl high into the trees, almost as though they were searching. The crow was now still and lifeless, and the figures lifted it up above their heads on a bed fashioned of branches and dirt. Procession, singing together their most sorrowful lament, vanished into the mist and the rain, swallowed by the storm until their song was no longer heard. Woodkid sat for a while, shaken by what they had seen, wondering if this was a dream. But Woodkid did not wake up. The rain began to ease, and the clouds broke as Woodkid, a little soggy, squelched their way back across the valley to the camp beneath the beech tree. Chapter 4. Woodkid and Muntjac go to a party. Woodkid was walking through a field towards their camp when they saw something moving about nearby the old beech tree. They ran towards it as fast as they could and got within a short distance of the tree before realizing who it was. "Muntjac!" he shouted. Muntjac turned, and a smile spread across his face. "Hello, Woodkid. I wondered if you'd still be camped here." "It's so good to see you. You wouldn't believe what I've just seen." Woodkid had already forgotten the anger that he'd felt towards Muntjac and was so excited to see him again. Woodkid told Muntjac about the fallen crow and the terrible ghouls that carried away its body. Muntjac stroked his chin pensively. "Hyphy," he said. "Hyphy?" questioned Woodkid. "Yes, Woodkid. The seasons are changing now, and I was hoping..." But before Muntjac could finish, his attention was stolen by the sound of instruments playing off in the distance. From the edge of the clearing, a troupe of musicians burst in, laughing and dancing wildly. Woodkid danced along to the tune for a few moments. Then raced off towards them. "Woodkid! Woodkid!" Muntjac said urgently, but it was too late. Woodkid was already halfway across the field. He greeted the troop excitedly, invited them back to the tree, and offered to make tea for everyone. They eagerly followed, and as everyone sat drinking tea, the musicians explained where they were going. They were on their way to the grandest party of the year in honor of the Queen of the Forest, and everyone would be there. Party? Queen? Muntjac, we have to go. Woodkid turned to the musicians and asked excitedly, "Can we come?" "Of course," they replied. "The festival is for everyone in the Queen's woodland realm." "Woodkid!" Muntjac tried to interject, but it was no use, because Woodkid was far too excited and had already began throwing things in his bag ready to head off with the musicians. Muntjac's apprehension lingered, and as the group headed off, he followed quietly behind them, desperate to speak with Woodkid. But by the way things were going, it seemed they would have no chance to speak in private before the party, which would mean trouble. The journey took Woodkid along paths they had never seen before, through steep and slippery ravines and across hillsides they never knew existed. Just as the sun was beginning to set, twinkling lights appeared in the sky, greens and blues that cascaded down into what looked like a deep ravine. As the troop approached, trees came into view. The closer they went, the more detail emerged. Towers, flats, and a city came into view, all built between thousands of trees. Woodkid was lost for words. He looked at Muntjac, grinning. Mutchak smiled back. Before they had reached the city gates, they were surrounded by hundreds of spirits. The whole troop crossed through a gateway into an open glade. They had arrived. A grand party was well underway, and the party band began to play as the moon began to rise. Activities grew louder. Guests kept on arriving through the gates to join the body of dancing creatures and spirits celebrating together. Soon after, Cilia and Flagella, the weavers, arrived at the party. The two had travelled from the other side of the woodland and had brought their whole tribe along. A great fire burned in the centre of the glade, and the tribe raised their cups and drank to the health of the woodlands. Woodkid wished to meet the Queen, so Muntjac decided to introduce them. Muntjac and Woodkid went hand in hand towards the Queen. They squeezed through the crowd until they found themselves at the foot of her throne. The Queen of the Woodland towered above them. She was adorned in long, flowing robes of deep violet and sky blue, over which she wore shimmering metal armor, glyphs and symbols etched into the metal. It was an ancient language only the trees could speak. She sat upon a throne carved of wood and was surrounded by soldiers holding pikes and banners, and a bustling crowd of eager woodland spirits. Woodkid was lost for words. The Queen looked down at Woodkid and Muntjac and greeted them with a broad smile. "Hello, Muntjac. Who have you brought with you today?" "This is my friend Woodkid. They are very excited to meet you," said Muntjac. Overwhelmed with her beauty, Woodkid squirmed and shyly smiled. "Hello," Woodkid said, before half hiding behind Muntjac. "Hello, Woodkid. It's lovely to meet you. Welcome to my party for all the spirits of the woodland realm. Why have I never met you before?" The Queen wondered. Muntjac sensed how shy Woodkid had become. "They are from far, far away, Your Honor. From a faraway corner of the woodland realm." "I see," replied the Queen, raising one eyebrow. A wry grin spread across her face, and she continued, "Welcome to the party, Woodkid. I hope you meet lots of kindred spirits." Chapter 5. The party continued well past night, until the light of day brightened the sky. It was terrific fun. The mighty fire continued to burn in the glade, and the tables never seemed to empty. Suddenly, there was a cry, and the music stopped. Woodkid turned to see a figure holding a man in their arms and weeping. Someone had died. The night was still and quiet. But in that silence, there was a far-off drumming that Woodkid remembered. The spirits stood up from their tables and turned to face the woods. Lanterns glowed in the darkness, and behind them, Woodkid saw a figure emerge between misty clouds. Nobody moved. The Queen, expressionless, stood abruptly and watched, silent and unmoving, as the figure made its way towards her. Her soldiers were still. Everybody was still. The figure glided towards the body and exhaled a slow, languid breath upon it, levitated, and began to move into the forest. "Stop!" commanded Woodkid. The crowd did not react. Woodkid was furious that nobody else was willing to do anything. "Bring him back!" cried Woodkid. "Hyphy," Mutchak whispered, "the great woodland god of death." "What are you doing?" cried Woodkid. Hyphy, the god of death, turned, but did not look at Woodkid. Instead, their gaze landed upon Muntjac. "Stop!" cried Woodkid again. But it was no use. Hyphy turned his back and vanished into the trees. Only silence remained. The beings began to drift off in different directions, and the entire scene, the spirits, the tables, the queen, everything faded into a mist. Before long, Woodkid and Muntjac found themselves alone again, just the two of them. "You shouldn't have done that, Woodkid." "Someone had to stand up to Hyphy. I don't care if they're a god." "You still have so much to understand, Woodkid," Muntjac said. "When something dies, Hyphy takes them back to the earth. Then the creature lives again. They are not gone, but become another part of the woodland. They're keeping it alive, don't you see? When something passes away in the woodland, it becomes part of new life." "Sounds like a stupid idea to me," said Woodkid. The friends were silent again until they reached Woodkid's camp at the foot of the beech tree. "Come on, let's make some tea. It's nearly dawn." Muntjac smiled. He still had something to speak of with Woodkid, but thought it could probably wait for another time. Chapter 6. Woodkid Sees a God. Woodkid had been travelling for so long. They had left the camp in secret, under the nautical light of dawn. I had now lost count of how many times the sun had risen and set. Muntjac was still fast asleep in the arms of the beech tree when Woodkid left, and would probably have tried to stop them from leaving. But Woodkid was determined. For all the creatures of the woodlands, Woodkid would find Hyphy and stop him before he took anyone else's life. Surely, if they were a god, they could still be reasoned with. The idea that Hyphy would take all the living things out of the woodland filled Woodkid with a sense of futility and sadness and anger. With each cycle of the sun, the days grew longer. The leaves were beginning to change from yellowy greens to golds and reds. Woodkid could feel the time passing and the world changing. Woodkid had now found themselves in a grey, swampy wetland. The grasses were so tall they couldn't see very far at all. So they climbed to the top of a hill to survey the land. From the dark, grey clouds above, it started to rain, lightly at first and then more heavily. It felt as though the world wanted Woodkid to turn back. Not too far away from the foot of the hill was a pond. The rain had caused the muddy hill to become unstable, and Woodkid, peering across the landscape, lost their footing and was sent stumbling and sliding down, rolling onto the banks of the pond, nearly falling into the waters below. Shaken and scared, they lay there for a moment, catching their breath. A light peered over the water, faint at first, but then it grew. Woodkid realized they had been there before. They couldn't remember when. From all around, smaller lights faded into reality, and with those lights came the familiar beat of the drum. Hyphy appeared above the water and walked towards the bank. The smaller lights became the ghostly mushroom priests, with their round, spiked hats and glowing lanterns. They were covered in soil and stone as though they had escaped from the earth. "Stop!" screamed Woodkid. "I command you to leave these woods and never return." The ghostly retinue followed Hyphy across the water and over the mud and long grass. Woodkid pointed his finger and demanded one last time, "I said, leave!" One of the mushroom priests halted in their tracks. Pausing momentarily, they turned to Woodkid and slowly crept over. Woodkid was scared but tried to be brave. The priest's eyes darted left and right as though scanning the world around it, but still seemed to be looking right into Woodkid's heart. "Whose life are you going to take next?" cried Woodkid accusingly. A flash of lightning ran across the sky, and the mushroom priest's eyes froze on Woodkid.
Muntjac.
Woodkid's heart sank as the mushroom priest vanished into the rain. "Muntjac?" Woodkid didn't know what to do. Didn't know what to say. They couldn't let this happen. They had to do something, anything. They looked up at the hill they had fallen from, and standing tall at its peak was the Watcher. Woodkid cried, burying their face in their hands, and the Watcher slowly lifted its front paw, carefully padded down to the wet bank. The Great Hound nuzzled Woodkid's face with their own, and Woodkid tightly gripped the long wet fur of the Watcher's snout. The rain continued for some time, and it seemed there was no sign of sun for the rest of the day. With Woodkid on the watcher's back, they left the wetlands and rode back. Through the woods, across the valley, and to the great beech tree where they had left Muntjac. He was still sleeping. "Muntjac!" cried Woodkid. "We have to hide." There was no reply. "Muntjac! Get up! We have to hide! Hyphy's coming!" Muntjac didn't move. The watcher sat and watched in the pouring rain. "Help me!" shouted Woodkid at the dog spirit. The watcher stood and stared at Woodkid. Woodkid was now angry and furious. They picked up a rock and threw it as hard as they could at the Great Hound, who diligently tiptoed to the side, evading the rock. Woodkid was out of breath, trying to wake Muntjac. A pile of building materials stood to the side of the beech tree. Woodkid and Muntjac had been collecting materials all year to build their own house, the house Woodkid had seen in their dream. Woodkid began pulling branches and rope out of the pile and furiously weaving them together. "We need to move him. We need to get him out of the woods. It's the only way we can stop Hyphy." Woodkid heaved Muntjac's body onto the makeshift raft and secured it with long grasses. "Come on," Woodkid called to the watcher, and with a running start began to drag the raft across the muddy ground. It was so heavy. "Please, help!" The watcher took the rope from Woodkid, and with great ease the raft began to slide across the earth. Woodkid ran ahead of the watcher, scouting for a way out of the woodlands. The dull sound of drums could be heard through the rain, meaning that Hyphy and the mushroom priests were not too far behind. "Come on, keep going," cheered Woodkid. The watcher was now growing tired and had begun to lose speed. They had travelled far, and in the distance they could see the weavers' village and smoke rising from thatched huts. If they kept following the path, they would surely escape the woodlands in time. Lanterns began to appear in the trees, and the fiery light of Hyphy's eyes lit the canopy of trees. Soon, they came across an old dead tree. The tree was forked. It had been split right down the middle, a great deep wound at the center of the trunk. The watcher needed to rest. Muntjac was left at the foot of the dead tree as the huge hound crashed to the ground, panting heavily, the rain drenching its fur. The dead tree was at the top of a slope and the rain ran down into the valley. Woodkid stared into the woods as the lights and drums drew nearer. Woodkid rushed to Muntjac and hugged him as tight as they could. The priests floated before them, and Hyphy loomed over the old dead tree. And slowly raising one long arm, pointed at Muntjac's now lifeless body. "No, please don't take my friend," Woodkid pleaded and cried. The Watcher wanted to console Woodkid, but was too tired. The priests surrounded Muntjac and lifted the raft above their heads before turning and floating down into the darkness of the valley below. Chapter 7. Woodkid says farewell. Winter. Muntjac was gone, and everything seemed so much worse now. Worse than before Woodkid had ever met his friend, and it seemed like there was no way anything could ever make the world a more bearable place to be part of. Woodkid sat at the bottom of the great beach and thought about all the places they had travelled, and how they would all now be tainted with loss and with heartbreak. The nights were growing dark and cold. Beams of moonlight lit the canopy of leaves above, but barely had the strength to break through. The night was still, and a faint rustling could be heard before the beach. The Watcher pattered out of the trees and with his head down low to the earth walked straight to Woodkid. In one graceful movement, the Great Hound curled itself around the trunk of the beech tree, enveloping Woodkid with a mass of fur. Woodkid gripped the long fur and sunk a tearful face into the warm chest of the spirit. Slowly rising and falling with each breath. The Watcher was silent, laying its head down on the earth. Woodkid opened their eyes and watched the Great Spirit and wondered why it had come. The moonlight, which at first had seemed dim, began to grow in intensity and illuminate a rich mosaic of leaves above them. The trees became mighty pillars that created shafts of light that poured down all around them. Why did Muntjac have to go?
Mutchak did not go. They are all around us right now. They have joined the woodlands and are helping to keep all the living spirits strong and healthy. All the places you and Muntjac walk together, he will be there, ensuring that life continues forever. Every flower and leaf, mushroom and creature, Muntjac is in the earth and the water and the air.
Muntjac's spirit had rejoined the woodlands, but this did not quell the loss that Woodkid felt. The Great Hound's head rose from the earth and turned to Woodkid, staring deep into their heart with eyes deep with the memories of the land itself.
You must celebrate the life they lived and the joy they shared during their time.
Woodkid nestled deep into the warm nest of fur. They slept soundly all through that long night. And as the sun rose, they began to plan a way to celebrate Muntjac's life. The Watcher bowed down to the earth to let Woodkid climb atop their back. Woodkid held on tight, and suddenly they began flying through the trees, down onto the paths, over streams and through the branches. Woodkid could see the woodlands below him in a way they had never ever seen before. The world seemed to be growing bigger and greater than they had ever imagined. The great crash of leaves, they landed at the gates of the village. Flagella and Cilia met them upon their arrival, surrounded by villagers from their tribe. In the warmth of their temple, they listened to Woodkid's plan and quickly began weaving new strands. They weaved and weaved and weaved, all through the night and dawn. The weavers and the villagers began connecting all the trees together, sending a message out across all the woodland. Not just reaching the trees, but through the soil to the plants and the air, through the water and all the animals. The forest was more alive than ever. All the land seemed to be resounding, and Woodkid could feel it all around them. Villagers hastily loaded carts with fallen trees. and travelled to the beech tree that Woodkid called home, where they built 5 tables for everyone to sit and cheer. Soon, all the creatures and spirits of Woodland arrived. They wore their finest robes and brought instruments to play. Hundreds came to celebrate the life of their friend Muntjac and to share stories of their time in the woodlands and to give thanks for them. They set off on a great procession around all the woodlands. At Mutchak's favourite places, they sung songs to bring cheer and joy to the land. The weavers held Woodkid's hand and walked through the trees, laughing and singing. The watchers silently patting behind them. They reached the old split tree where Woodkid and Muntjac had first met, and where they had had their final moment together. Woodkid placed their hand on the old tree and thought of their friend. Woodkid turned to see the weavers and the watchers who had been so caring and kind, and they knew that they would never be alone again.
Woodland Tales by Hipkiss Graney. Told by Synthia Oenga. Music composed and performed by Anna Palmer and Beth Bellis. Written by Gavin Curtis and Jonathan Graney.